Welcome to ProcedureFlow's Art of the Flow series. This short video explains some best practices when mapping in ProcedureFlow. In ProcedureFlow, it's important to try to keep flows neat and well organized so viewers are able to find the information they need quickly. For this reason, we recommend mapping vertically down the main spine of your flow, which will allow the user to scroll up and down the flow more often than they are scrolling left to right. Each shape should have approximately 3 grid lines between them, as you can see here on our editing canvas. This allows room for the arrows between shapes and for more shapes to appear on the screen at one time. Of course, there are exceptions. When mapping down the main spine of the canvas, there is often a decision to make, as you can see with this example. The question, "Do you have all the ingredients?" is in a decision diamond, which indicates a fork in the road. The viewer needs to make a choice when they see a decision diamond. In cases like these, we try to use the 80-20 rule when mapping, meaning we would continue mapping vertically for the most common scenario, and we'd map the exceptions to the right of the decision diamond, as you can see here. Another mapping best practice is to try to keep all the text on one line. It's easier for the brain to process small amounts of text horizontally. If more text is required, we will use more than one line, and we often align the text to the left when there are more than 3 lines by using the Align Left button. If you have long lists of text to include in your flow, bulleted or numbered lists can be a useful mapping convention to help make it more coherent for the reader. And when presenting text in a sentence, try to use as few words as possible. For example, instead of asking the question, "Do you have all the ingredients?" a best practice may be simply to ask, "Have all ingredients?" The brain automatically filters out the connecting words anyway. So removing the extra words gives the brain less to process and allows users to navigate the flows much more quickly. Try to keep flows to approximately 15 to 20 shapes on the canvas. This limits the amount of scrolling for the user while they navigate the flow. If you find yourself with more than 15 to 20 shapes on your canvas, you can likely find an opportunity to place select steps into their own subflow. This is another best practice. Look for opportunities to create small hyperlinked subflows. The more subflows you have, the easier it will be to navigate each piece of the process, and you will be able to reuse these subflows in multiple processes. Keep an eye out for steps that could be grouped and labeled as their own subflow. In this flow, I see an opportunity to create a subflow. To push the steps into a subflow, I would select these shapes on my canvas, right-click with my mouse, and select Move to New Flow. In the dialog box, I give my new flow a name and then click Move. Now I have one shape with the name of my new flow, and as you can see, the words are underlined because it is a link to a subflow. Then, when I access the new flow I just created, notice that the shapes are in the same order and location as when I moved them. I just need to reorganize them into a vertical configuration on the canvas. Now that this part of the process is its own subflow, when the user reaches the end, they will not know what to do next. I have what we call a dead end here. We need to provide the viewer with the next instruction so as not to leave them wondering what they need to do. There are 2 options in this case. I can put an endpoint with done or complete to tell the user, when you get to this point, you are finished and there's nothing else to do. Or, as in this case, I'm going to add an action shape with the instruction, go back and continue at the end of this subflow. Go back and continue is a convention we use to tell the user there are more steps to complete back on the previous flow. The user now needs to use the back button in their browser at the top left of their screen. When I do this, it brings me back to the previous flow, and the shape that I used to enter this subflow has a yellow highlight or backglow around it. This helps the user see where they left off, so they know to continue on from there when they arrive back in the previous flow. To avoid having any dead ends in your flows before launching ProcedureFlow, it's a good practice to do a final review and walkthrough of every possible path through the flows to be sure the viewer is always directed to the next step in a process or to an endpoint. Connector arrows are an important component to mapping cohesive flows. We use connector arrows to join our shapes together and indicate the next steps in the process for the viewer. When clicking the connector button, a circle appears on each side of every shape. This indicates all the possible connection points. To add a connector between shapes, click on the desired circle for the origin point and drag to the desired circle on the shape where the arrow will point to. You'll see the circle changes to green to indicate you've hovered over the connection point. I'll just finish adding the rest of the arrows here. Notice that I have this table in a backstory shape to the right of the flow. This is additional contextual information related to the action of buying ingredients. We'll add a connector arrow pointing back towards the step in the flow that our backstory pertains to. Notice which direction the arrow is pointing. This tells the user that the backstory is related to the action. To reinforce that the backstory shape contains contextual information, change the arrow from a solid to a dashed connector. To do this, simply double-click on the arrow and select the radio button for a dashed connector, then click Update. I would use this same type of dashed arrow if there was an image or a screenshot as a reference for a step in the process as well. Now I've connected all the shapes in this flow, and I've added my Go Back and Continue. I'll save my changes and close out of the editing canvas. From draft mode, I will use the back arrow to go back to my previous page. As you can see, I have the yellow backglow around the shape indicating where I left off in the flow. I now need to link this shape to the next step on my main spine to drive the viewer to the next step. I will go back into editing mode. I'll click the connector button, and I'm going to select the circle on the bottom of my Buy Ingredients action shape and drag my arrow to Preheat Oven to 350 degrees shape. As you can see, my line is diagonal, which isn't very nice from an aesthetic standpoint. This brings me to our next mapping best practice, which is keeping connector lines either horizontal, vertical, or at a 90-degree angle. In this case, it would be best to bend this arrow at a 90-degree angle. To bend an arrow at a 90-degree angle, make sure you first select the connector. Then, click the green circle in the middle of the connector and drag it until you have that 90-degree angle bend in the line. Use the grid lines on the canvas as a guide to help you when bending arrows. Every time you create a bend in your line, you create 2 more segments, and they each have a green circle, in case you need to bend it again. To close the topic of connector arrows, it's best to avoid arrows that intersect each other. This creates confusion and can send the viewer down the wrong path. It's also a best practice to avoid using long arrows that wrap around many shapes if possible, as this makes the flow more difficult to follow. When mapping, it often occurs that you need a piece of information or maybe an image to complete a part of the flow, but you don't have it at the moment. It might be a case where you need to consult with someone before mapping the rest of the steps, but you don't want to stop your progress. A best practice to continue mapping, without forgetting to go back later to fill in the missing information, is to pull in a backstory shape and type the letters WIP for work in progress and a few words to describe what you need to do, or even a name if multiple individuals are mapping in the entry point. After saving your progress, it's easy to find all the locations where you use the WIP placeholders. Since all the flows are searchable, you can use the Jump to Flows search bar to find anything that has been marked this way. Simply type WIP or whoever's name you used in the search bar, and it will bring up every flow that has this text marked in it. To summarize, some basic rules to follow while building your flows include the following. Map down the main spine of the process with exceptions to the right and merging back to the spine once handled. Try to keep flows to 15 to 20 shapes vertically when possible. Smaller flows are easier to consume for the viewer. Take any opportunity to move a selection of steps into a subflow. The level of detail should keep new and tenured employees in mind. By moving steps into subflows, tenured viewers can skim through the steps, while new employees can view the details they need in the subflows. Ensure no flows include dead ends. Make sure they have either an endpoint or they direct the viewer to go back and continue. Keep text to a minimum and on one line as much as possible. Bend connector arrows to keep them vertical and horizontal. And finally, use dashed arrows to connect reference backstories and images to the step that they pertain to. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out the other videos in the Art of the Flow series.